They laughed at human aggression until one bar fight changed everything, reached its explosive pinnacle when footage of 4 humans defeating elite Crash warriors spread across the galaxy. In an emergency council session, humanity finally revealed its concealed military capabilities and delivered an ultimatum. We still choose peace, but we will fight as equals. The galaxy's balance of power shifted irreversibly in those decisive moments. The recycled air in Nexus Station's cosmic cantina carried the familiar scent of burning metal and synth alcohol. Jake Morrison sat alone at the bar, nursing a glass of amber liquid that tasted nothing like Earth whiskey, but served the same purpose. The dim lights cast long shadows across the polished metal countertop, reflecting fragments of conversations in a dozen alien languages. Jake checked his chronometer for the 5th time in half an hour. 70 tons of rare earth metals sat in his cargo hold, bound for Kepler Station once customs clearance came through. The delay was typical. Humans always waited longer than other species. 30 years into galactic diplomacy, and Earth's children were still treated as the newcomers, the untested species, the soft-skinned servants. He took another sip, letting the synthetic alcohol burn a path down his throat. The cantina buzzed with the usual mix of traders, diplomats, and station personnel. At a table near the viewport, a group of Vorak merchants gestured with their upper limbs, mandibles clicking in what Jake recognized as laughter. "And then the human negotiator accepted half the original price," one of them exclaimed, followed by more clicking laughter. "Their colony on Proxima B is already scaling back operations. Another cycle, and we'll have pushed them out entirely." Jake kept his eyes on his drink. He'd heard it all before. The casual dismissal, the barely concealed contempt. Humans were the galaxy's newest spacefaring species, and the Galactic Council had made it clear from first contact that Earth's diplomats were expected to be accommodating, patient, and above all, non-threatening. The policy had worked, after a fashion. Humanity had secured trade routes, established colonies on 12 worlds, and earned observer status in council proceedings. But the cost was paid in dignity. Jake had seen it firsthand, the one-sided negotiations, the security measures that applied only to human vessels, the diplomatic slights that went unanswered. A distant memory surfaced, his sister Lucy's small hand clutching his as they watched the evacuation of New Portland, a human settlement on the edge of Crash Empire territory. The official explanation called it a mutual security adjustment. In reality, 3,000 colonists had been forced to abandon homes, businesses, and years of terraforming work on 2 weeks' notice. Lucy had been 7 then, old enough to understand what was happening, but young enough to ask questions Jake couldn't answer. "Why don't we fight back?" she had whispered, her voice barely audible over the rumble of evacuation transports. Jake had no reply that wouldn't sound like defeat. The cantina door hissed open, pulling Jake from his memories. The ambient noise dropped immediately, conversations dying mid-sentence. 4 Crash warriors strode in, their black chitinous armor gleaming under the bar lights. Jake recognized their leader immediately, War Prime Theore, his carapace adorned with the silver markings of 20 successful campaigns. The Crash were known for 2 things: their absolute loyalty to their emperor and their contempt for species they deemed unworthy warriors. Humans topped that list. "Refreshment for the true warriors of the galaxy," Theore announced, his translator rendering the words in the common trade language. His secondary arms gestured dismissively at the other patrons. "Make space, soft ones." The other patrons, Vorak traders, Meridian scientists, even a hulking Jurian mercenary, moved aside without protest. Only Jake remained in place, not out of defiance but simple inertia. He had another hour before his clearance would come through, and moving meant drawing attention. The strategy failed. Theore's compound eyes, fixed on Jake's human form, and the War Prime's mandibles flexed in what passed for a crash smile. "Ah, one of the soft servants remains," Theori said, loud enough for the entire cantina to hear. "Tell me, human, how many Earth cycles has your species been traveling the stars? 30? A mere blink for a proper civilization." Jake nodded politely. The response drilled into every human who traveled beyond Sol. "We're young, but learning quickly. Can I buy you a drink, War Prime?" Laughter erupted from the Crash Warriors, a harsh sound like metal scraping against chitin. Theori moved closer, looming over Jake's seated form. "It offers to buy me a drink. Such generosity from a species that surrenders colonies without firing a shot." Theori's secondary arms mimicked a human shrugging in defeat. "We took New Portland without losing a single warrior. Your kind fled with their young, crying and stumbling into their ships." A ripple of amusement spread through the cantina. Several species had profited from humanity's conciliatory approach to galactic politics. The Vorak had secured favorable mining rights on 3 human-claimed planets. The Meridians had borrowed human genetic research without proper compensation. Even the station they now stood on charged human vessels triple the docking fees of other species. Jake felt a familiar tension in his shoulders, but kept his expression neutral. It was an orderly evacuation. No one was hurt. "Hurt? Of course not. Your council representatives begged for the right to leave peacefully." Theori's voice rose, playing to his growing audience. "They showed us images of their frightened offspring, as if the fear of a human child should move warriors. A 3-year-old evacuee, clutching some comfort object, tears streaming down its soft face." Jake's hand tightened around his glass. The image was specific enough to be real. A propaganda vid from the new Portland evacuation. And 3 was wrong. Lucy had been 7, not 3, and the comfort object had been their father's old Earth Force patch, the last thing they had of him after the mining accident on Europa. Theore continued, mandibles spread wide in mockery. "Such weakness. The mothers were worse, pleading for more time as if their attachment to temporary dwellings mattered to the Empire." Something shifted in Jake's chest. 30 years of diplomatic training, of swallowing insults, of turning the other cheek. It all seemed suddenly hollow. The galaxy had mistaken humanity's restraint for weakness, their patience for fear. "She was 7, Jake said quietly. The cantina fell silent. Theori's compound eyes fixed on Jake, his posture shifting subtly toward combat readiness. "What did you say, soft one?" Jake set down his glass carefully. "My sister. She was 7, not 3, during the new Portland evacuation." For a moment, no one moved. Then Theor's mandibles clicked rapidly, laughter, or perhaps anticipation. "Your sister. How fortunate she had you to protect her. Did you comfort her fears? Did you explain why humans never fight back?" The War Prime leaned closer. "Does she still wake in the night, frightened of shadows? Does she still cry when she thinks of the home she lost?" Jake stood slowly. He was tall for a human, but still half a head shorter than the Crash Warrior. Around them, patrons shifted uncomfortably, sensing the change in atmosphere. Even the bartender, a 6-limbed foral who had served Jake dozens of times, moved back from the counter. "Maybe," Jake said, each word measured and calm. "That was a mistake." Theore struck without warning, a primary arm lashing out to catch Jake across the face. The blow would have felled most beings in the cantina. But Jake merely rocked back on his heels, a thin line of red appearing on his cheekbone. The silence deepened. No human had ever struck back against a Crash Warrior in living memory. The diplomatic consequences would be severe. Trade agreements would be jeopardized. Council standing would be compromised. Jake wiped the blood from his face and looked at the red smear on his fingertips. Then, he drove his fist directly into the unarmored joint between Theori's thorax and abdomen. The War Prime staggered back, his translator emitting a burst of static as he clicked out sounds too rapid for the device to process. His warriors stood frozen in shock, not at the attack itself, but at the precision of it. Jake had struck the exact spot where Crash anatomy was most vulnerable, a weakness few non-Crash should have known. "Get him!" Theore roared, recovering his balance. "Show this soft one what true warriors can do." The 4 Crash warriors advanced, their armor plates shifting to combat configuration. Jake backed up against the bar, reached behind him without looking, and closed his hand around his now empty glass. With a sharp twist of his wrist, he broke it against the countertop, leaving a jagged edge that glinted in the dim light. "Jake!" a voice called from the entrance. Pete Richards, another cargo pilot waiting on clearance, had entered the cantina with 2 other humans, Lisa Wong, a xenobiologist stationed on Nexus, and Ben Clark, a communications specialist. Their expressions shifted from confusion to resolve as they assessed the situation. Without a word, they moved to flank Jake. Pete grabbed a metal stool. Lisa palmed a small container from her lab coat, likely specimen preservative, caustic enough to damage Crash exoskeletons. Ben positioned himself at Jake's right, hands empty, but stance balanced for combat. The other patrons scrambled to clear space, retreating to the walls or ducking behind tables. The foral bartender hit a silent alarm, though station security was at least 5 minutes away. 4 against 4, Theory said, mandibles twitching in what might have been amusement. The soft ones wish to play at war. "We don't wish to play at anything," Jake replied, the broken glass steady in his hand. "But we're done being disrespected." The first Crash warrior lunged at Pete, expecting an easy victory. Instead, Pete ducked under the attack, pivoted the metal stool, and drove one of its legs up into the warrior's unarmored neck joint. The impact produced a sickening crack, and the Crash staggered sideways, green fluid leaking from the wound. Lisa flicked her wrist, sending preservative fluid into the compound eyes of another warrior. The Crash screamed, the sound so alien and unexpected that several patrons flinched. The blinded warrior flailed wildly, only to meet Ben's precisely timed strike to the back of its thorax. Theory roared in fury and charged at Jake, both primary arms extended for a killing blow. Jake sidestepped with unexpected speed, dragging the broken glass along the gap between Theory's thorax plates. More green fluid seeped from the wound, but the war prime barely slowed. "You will die for this insult!" Theory hissed, pivoting to face Jake again. "Maybe," Jake acknowledged, circling cautiously, but not easily, and not alone. The humans moved with eerie coordination, covering each other's flanks, passing makeshift weapons between them when opportunity arose. Pete used his stool to block a Crash warrior's strike aimed at Lisa's back. Ben called out joint positions when he spotted armor gaps. Jake found himself instinctively protecting his compatriots' blind spots, a behavior so natural he barely registered doing it. The cantina had become completely silent, except for the sounds of combat. Every patron watched in astonishment as the humans, a species known for diplomatic concession and commercial flexibility, fought with ruthless efficiency against warriors from one of the galaxy's most feared military powers. It lasted less than 4 minutes. When station security finally burst through the door, they found 4 badly wounded Crash warriors and 4 humans standing back to back in the center of the devastated cantina. Jake still held his broken glass, now slick with green fluid. Pete's stool was dented beyond recognition. Lisa's lab coat was torn at the shoulder, revealing a nasty gash that she seemed to have barely noticed. Ben was breathing hard, one eye swelling shut, but still on his feet. "What is the meaning of this?" The security chief, a meridian with the characteristic silver skin of his species, demanded. Theore struggled to rise, his translator sputtering. "These humans. Attacked. Unprovoked. Council. Violation." Jake stepped forward, blood still trickling from the cut on his cheek. "Station security cameras will show otherwise. Chief, We defended ourselves after the war prime struck first. The chief looked from the humans to the crash warriors, his expression unreadable. After a moment, he activated his comm unit. Medical teams to the Nexus Cantina. Multiple injured. And send a direct transmission to Meridian Prime. The Council will want to see this. Within an hour, security footage from the cantina had been transmitted to every major news network in Council space. By the end of the station's day cycle, it had been viewed 10 million times. The images of 4 humans successfully fighting off 4 crash warriors, considered among the galaxy's elite combat forces, sent shockwaves through diplomatic channels. Emergency council sessions were called. Human ambassadors were summoned for questioning. Military leaders from a dozen species convened private meetings to reassess threat analyses. On Meridian Prime, the Galactic Council's permanent home, Ambassador Helen Carter watched the footage for the 20th time, her expression grim. "This changes everything," she said to Admiral Ben Clark, the highest-ranking human military officer permitted at council proceedings. 30 years of careful diplomacy, undone in 4 minutes. "Not undone," the Admiral replied, studying the combat with professional interest. "Transformed. Look at their movement patterns, pack-hunting behaviors encoded in our DNA for hundreds of thousands of years. We've been hiding our nature so long we almost forgot it was there." Carter sighed. "The Crash Empire is demanding extradition of all 4 humans involved. They're citing 17 different treaty violations. And our colonies are refusing to comply," Clark said. "New Portland survivors have already raised a defense fund for the legal proceedings. Earth Force veterans are organizing solidarity demonstrations at every human embassy." The ambassador's secure comm chimed. "It's the Council. They're ready for our statement." The Galactic Council chamber was a vast amphitheater, with representatives from 37 spacefaring species arranged in concentric rings. Humans, as non-voting observers, were typically seated in the outermost tier. Today, however, Ambassador Carter had been summoned to the central speaking platform, a rare occurrence that underscored the gravity of the situation. She was not alone. Admiral Clark stood to her left, while Captain Rex Turner, commander of Earth's first interstellar vessel, and Dr. Carl Bishop, the foremost human xenoanthropologist, flanked her right. The council speaker, an ancient Meridian whose silver skin had faded to dull gray with age, activated the chamber's acoustic amplifiers. "The council recognizes the human delegation," the speaker intoned. "You will address the matter of unprovoked violence committed by human citizens against representatives of the Crash Empire, a founding member of this council." Ambassador Carter stepped forward. "Honorable Speaker, esteemed council members, I thank you for this opportunity to address recent events. However, I must correct your characterization. The security footage clearly shows war prime theory, striking the human citizen first. What followed was not unprovoked, but defensive." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. The Crash representative rose from his seat, armor plates clicking in agitation. "The human distorts reality. The war prime's gesture was merely emphatic, not an attack. The disproportionate response reveals humans' true barbaric nature, one they have concealed from this council through deception." "Not deception," Dr. Bishop said, his voice carrying clearly across the chamber without technological assistance. "Restraint." The council speaker's eye stalks swiveled toward the xenoanthropologist. "Explain yourself, human." Bishop activated a holographic display that projected above the central platform. It showed archaeological images, stone spear points, bronze swords, steel armor, gunpowder weapons, nuclear missiles, orbital defense systems. "Esteemed Council, humanity evolved as persistence predators on a planet with extraordinary biodiversity and constant interspecies competition. Our ancestors developed tools for hunting, then turned those same tools to warfare. For over 10,000 years, human civilization advanced through near-constant conflict. The images shifted to historical battle scenes, from ancient armies to modern warfare. Many council members shifted uncomfortably at the displays of organized violence. 300 years ago, our species nearly destroyed itself in global conflicts, using weapons of unprecedented destructive power. We pulled back from that brink and built a unified planetary government. When we achieved faster-than-light travel and encountered the Galactic Council, we made a deliberate choice to present ourselves as the peaceful species we had become, rather than the warriors we had been. The Crash representative's mandibles clacked dismissively. Pretty words to excuse recent savagery. If humans were truly warriors, why surrender colonies without resistance? Why accept unfavorable treaties? Why behave as servants rather than equals? Captain Turner stepped forward, his Earth Force uniform immaculate despite the diplomatic protocol that had required humans to avoid military dress in council proceedings. "Because we chose peace," Turner said, his voice reflecting decades of command experience. "Not out of fear, but wisdom. We saw a galaxy at relative equilibrium and decided not to disrupt it. We accepted temporary disadvantages to build long-term relationships." The captain's eyes swept the chamber, meeting the gaze of each council species in turn. "But make no mistake, we remained capable of defending ourselves. The humans in that cantina displayed skills and instincts that every one of our species possesses. We can improvise weapons from our environment. We can coordinate without verbal communication. We can identify anatomical vulnerabilities in opponents we've never fought before. We can endure injuries that would incapacitate many species." Ambassador Carter raised a hand, and the holographic display shifted again. Now it showed human military capabilities that had never been revealed to the Council. Stealth technology, advanced tactical systems, weapons platforms disguised as scientific outposts. "For 30 years," she said, "we maintained a defensive posture that we chose not to advertise. Our cargo haulers can be converted to warships within hours. Our colony infrastructures include hidden defense grids. Our diplomatic vessels carry emergency military protocols." The council chamber erupted in shouted questions and accusations. The speaker pounded his ceremonial staff against the floor until order was restored. "Are you threatening this council, humans?" the speaker demanded. "No," Admiral Clark replied firmly. "We are introducing ourselves properly, at last. Humanity still desires peace, cooperation, and mutual prosperity. But we will no longer accept being treated as lesser beings. We still choose peace, but we will fight as equals if forced to do so." The Crash representative surged to his feet again. "Threats! Deception! The Crash Empire will not tolerate this change in status. We demand sanctions, reparations, and the immediate surrender of the 4 criminals who attacked our warriors." Dr. Bishop's voice cut through the renewed commotion. "War Prime Theory and his warriors have already been treated and released from medical care. They suffered no permanent injuries, because the humans in that cantina chose restraint, even in the heat of combat." He gestured toward the Crash representative. "Your warriors were not fighting to defend themselves. They were fighting to kill. The cantina's molecular scanners detected activated toxin sacs in their combat glands, a lethal response to a verbal disagreement." This revelation sent another shockwave through the chamber. The use of biological toxins in non-warfare settings violated one of the Council's oldest prohibitions. Ambassador Carter stepped forward again. "The human government will not surrender citizens who defended themselves against lethal force. Furthermore, we formally request a review of all treaties signed under the presumption of human diplomatic inexperience, including the new Portland Evacuation Agreement, the Vorak mining concessions, and the Meridian research protocols." She paused, letting the implications settle across the chamber. "We also request consideration for full council membership, with all rights and responsibilities that entails." The council session lasted 16 more hours, with debates ranging from legal technicalities to philosophical questions about species identity and disclosure. By its conclusion, no formal decisions had been reached. But the galactic political landscape had shifted irrevocably. In the days that followed, the repercussions spread through Council space with the speed of quantum communications. The Crash Empire issued formal threats against human colonies, only to receive calm but firm warnings that any aggressive action would trigger a response they were unprepared to face. When Crash Intelligence Services obtained scans of previously concealed human military capabilities, the Empire's threats abruptly ceased. The Vorak Trade Consortium, which had been preparing to force humans out of 3 more mining operations, suddenly reopened negotiations on terms favorable to Earth-based companies. Meridian Research Institutes proposed joint projects with full credit-sharing protocols. Even the docking fees at Nexus Station were quietly adjusted to match those of other Council species. Most telling was the rush of smaller powers to secure defensive arrangements with human colonies. Species that had previously ignored Earth's diplomatic overtures now sought assurances of protection against larger predatory empires. 1 month after the Cantina incident, humanity launched its first overtly military mission beyond Sol system. A fleet of 50 vessels, previously registered as cargo haulers, but now revealing their true configurations as warships, conducted a navigational exercise that happened to pass through contested regions where human colonies had faced harassment. The message was unmistakable. Humanity would no longer concede ground out of diplomatic nicety. 6 months later, Earth received a permanent seat on the Galactic Council. Ambassador Carter, Captain Turner, and Dr. Bishop formed the core of a new diplomatic corps that negotiated from a position of acknowledged strength rather than perceived weakness. Trade agreements were rewritten. Security protocols were established that treated humans as partners rather than suspects. The most surprising change came on Nexus Station itself. The cantina where the fight had occurred was officially renamed Morrison's Rest, and Jake found himself greeted with cautious respect when he returned from his Kepler station run. "Your usual Morrison?" the Foral bartender asked, setting a glass of synth whiskey on the counter without waiting for a response. Jake nodded, glancing around the rebuilt space. The damage from the fight had been repaired, but the atmosphere had changed permanently. Where once he might have overheard mockery of human weakness, now he caught fragments of conversation about human adaptability, resilience, and unexpected capabilities. At a nearby table, a young Vorak trader was explaining something to his companions, his mandibles moving in the subtle pattern that indicated respect rather than derision. Off. Evolutionary advantage. They developed as generalists on a high-gravity world with extreme environmental variation. Their bodies can endure significant damage and continue functioning. Their social structures evolved from pack-hunting behaviors that make coordinated action instinctive. Jake sipped his drink, only half listening. His thoughts were on Lucy. Now a xenobotanist working to restore the ecosystem humans had begun developing on New Portland before the evacuation. The colony was being re-established under a new treaty that recognized both human territorial rights and crash security concerns. "Pilot Morrison." Jake turned to find War Prime Theory standing beside him. The Crash Warrior's armor was polished to a ceremonial shine, with none of the battle markings he had worn before. "War Prime," Jake acknowledged, his posture relaxed but ready. Thea's compound eyes fixed on Jake with an intensity that translator technology couldn't convey. "I have studied your species since our encounter," the Crash Warrior said. "You could have killed me with your knowledge of our vulnerabilities. Instead, you chose injury over death." Jake shrugged. "That wasn't tactical. It's who we are." "Indeed." Theory's mandibles moved in a pattern Jake couldn't interpret. "The Crash respects strength, human. But we had misunderstood where yours lies. It is not in your ability to fight, but in your choice of when not to." The War Prime placed a ceremonial token on the bar, a small piece of his own armor, carved with Crash symbols. "Should you ever visit Crash Space, present this. You will be received as a warrior of honor." Without waiting for a response, Theore turned and left the cantina, his movements precise and formal. Jake picked up the token, turning it in his fingers before pocketing it. Across the room, he noticed Pete Richards and Lisa Wong entering, deep in conversation about the latest council proceedings. They spotted him and changed course toward the bar. "The hero of humanity," Pete said with a grin, clapping Jake on the shoulder. "Still drinking that synthetic swill. I see." Jake snorted. "Just a cargo pilot waiting on clearance." "A cargo pilot who changed the course of galactic politics," Lisa corrected, sliding onto the stool beside him. Her lab coat concealed the scar from the cantina fight. But Jake knew it was there, a permanent reminder of the day everything changed. "How's the research going?" he asked her, deflecting attention from himself. Lisa's eyes lit up. "Actually, that's why we came looking for you. The Meridians have approved my proposal for a comparative xenobiology study, full access to their genetic archives, and they're treating me as an equal contributor rather than a junior assistant. And my shipping company just signed a defense contract with 3 former Vorak mining worlds," Pete added. "They're paying premium rates for human crews. Turns out we're suddenly valuable employees." Jake nodded, taking another sip of his drink. The galaxy had recalibrated its understanding of humanity in a matter of months. Species that had dismissed humans as diplomatic curiosities now studied Earth's military history with newfound respect. Cultures that had exploited human flexibility now approached with careful offers of mutual benefit. "You hear from Lucy?" Pete asked, ordering drinks for himself and Lisa. "Yesterday," Jake confirmed. "She's leading a terraforming team back to New Portland. Says the Crash regional commander actually apologized for the original evacuation order." Lisa raised her eyebrows. "The Crash apologized? That's unprecedented." "The whole galaxy's unprecedented right now," Pete observed. "Who would have thought one bar fight would change everything?" Jake gazed into his drink, thinking about choices and consequences. For 30 years, humanity had chosen peace, restraint, and patience. Those remained their guiding principles. But now, the galaxy understood that these were choices made from strength, not weakness, moral decisions rather than biological limitations. "It wasn't the fight," he said finally. "It was what the fight revealed. We're still the same species we were before. The galaxy just sees us clearly now." Outside the viewport, a human military vessel passed by Nexus Station, its running lights tracing a path among the stars. Not a threat, but a reminder. Peace was valuable precisely because it was a choice, not an inevitability. Jake raised his glass in a silent toast to his sister, to New Portland, to the complex future unfolding before humanity. The galaxy had learned an important lesson. Underestimating others was always a mistake, regardless of how soft their skin might appear. Peace, backed by the credible capacity to defend what matters, had created a new galactic order, one where humans finally stood as equals among the stars.